2026 will not change your life by accident. It will only change if you do. Let me start with a truth most people don't want to hear. If 2026 ends and your life looks exactly like 2025, it won't be because you lacked information. It will be because you refuse to fix a few uncomfortable things that have been holding you back for years. Most people think they need more clarity. They say, I don't know what to do yet. That sounds responsible, but it's usually dishonest. Clarity doesn't come before commitment. Clarity comes from commitment. You don't get direction by waiting. You get direction by moving. The reason your path feels blurry is because you keep standing still. Decision creates momentum, and momentum creates clarity. Indecision is just fear dressed up as logic. Another reason people stay stuck is because they trust willpower more than systems. Willpower is emotional. It disappears when you're tired, stressed, or distracted. Your environment, on the other hand, is always working on you. The people you listen to, the content you consume, the conversations you tolerate, those things shape your future quietly and consistently. If you want different results in 2026, you don't need a new personality. You need a new environment. Change what you see every day, and your behavior will change without you fighting yourself. Now let's talk about being busy. Busy has become a badge of honor, but busy doesn't build wealth, peace, or purpose. Busy just builds exhaustion. Productivity is about outcomes, not activity. If everything you do doesn't clearly connect to a result you want, you're just staying occupied to avoid facing the truth. Successful people don't do more things. They do fewer things that matter more. In 2026, the question isn't, did you work hard? The question is, did your work actually move your life forward? Here's something even deeper. Your results are not controlled by your goals. They are controlled by your self-image. You will never outperform the version of yourself you secretly believe you are. If you see yourself as average, you will sabotage extraordinary opportunities. If you see yourself as unworthy, you will reject success before it arrives. Growth requires an identity upgrade. You don't rise to the level of your ambition. You fall to the level of your self-concept. Change how you see yourself, and your actions will change automatically. Another trap keeping people stuck is consumption without creation. Information is everywhere, but information alone doesn't create income, impact, or influence. People who win in the next era don't just watch, scroll, and listen. They build, share, and produce. Every time you create something, you position yourself as a problem solver instead of a spectator. Consumers wait for opportunities. Creators attract them. In 2026, the world won't reward who knows the most. It will reward who applies the most. Finally, let's end this excuse once and for all. Motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. If you wait to feel ready, inspired, or confident, you'll wait forever. High performers don't operate on feelings. They operate on principles. They do what needs to be done because it aligns with who they've decided to become. Discipline isn't punishment. It's self-respect in action. So if you want 2026 to be different, stop waiting. Decide. Design your environment, focus on results, upgrade your identity, create more than you consume, and act based on principles, not emotions. Fix these things, and 2026 won't just be another year, it will be the year everything finally changes. Most people walk around saying they're stuck because they lack clarity. They say they don't know what they want, don't know the right move, don't know the perfect time to start. But the truth is, clarity is rarely the real issue. The real issue is commitment. Because if clarity were the problem, information would fix it. And information has never been more available than it is right now. You don't lack options. You lack the willingness to choose one and accept the responsibility that comes with it. Clarity feels safe because it sounds logical. Commitment feels dangerous because it requires ownership. When you commit, you eliminate excuses. You can no longer blame confusion, timing, or other people. Commitment forces you to say, if this works, I get the credit. And if it fails, I take the blame. Most people aren't afraid of failure itself. They're afraid of being responsible for the outcome. So they stay undecided, telling themselves they're still figuring things out, when in reality, they're protecting themselves from accountability. Here's what people don't understand. Clarity is not a prerequisite for action. Action is the prerequisite for clarity. You don't discover the path by standing still and thinking harder. You discover it by moving, adjusting, and learning along the way. Every step forward gives you feedback. Feedback creates insight. Insight creates clarity. But if you refuse to take the first step, no amount of thinking will ever make things clear. Indecision freezes progress, and frozen progress feels like confusion. Commitment is uncomfortable because it removes the illusion of control. When you don't commit, you can pretend every option is still available. You can fantasize about multiple futures without risking any of them, but progress only happens when you collapse possibility into decision. The moment you commit, you trade comfort for growth, and growth always demands sacrifice of time, of convenience, of certainty. That's why commitment feels heavy, not because it's wrong, but because it's real. Another reason people struggle with commitment is perfectionism. They want guarantees before they move. They want to know the outcome before they begin. But guarantees don't exist at the beginning. They are earned through consistency. Waiting for perfect clarity is just another form of procrastination. It's fear pretending to be strategy. The people who get ahead are not the ones who knew everything from the start. They're the ones who were willing to move with partial information and refine as they went. When you commit, something powerful happens internally. Your mind stops asking, should I do this? And starts asking, how do I make this work? That shift changes everything. Questions determine focus, and focus determines results. Commitment redirects your energy from debating to building. Instead of scanning for exits, you start creating solutions. Instead of looking for permission, you start developing competence. Commitment simplifies life because it removes unnecessary decisions and replaces them with execution. Clarity is overrated. Direction matters more. Momentum matters more. Discipline matters more. You don't need to see the entire staircase to take the next step. You just need to decide that standing still is no longer acceptable. Once you commit, clarity will chase you. Opportunities will reveal themselves. Confidence will grow from action, not thought. So if you feel stuck, stop asking for more clarity and start demanding more commitment from yourself. Decide something. Back it with action. Accept the risk. Own the outcome. Because the life you want is not hidden behind confusion. It's hidden behind the decision you kept. EP, avoiding. Most people believe their success or failure comes down to willpower. They think if they can just try harder, stay motivated longer, or push themselves more, everything will change. But willpower is unreliable. It rises and falls with energy, mood, stress, and circumstances. Some days it's strong, and some days it's completely gone. If your progress depends on willpower, your results will always be inconsistent. That's why so many people start strong and quit quietly. They trusted something that was never designed to carry the weight of long-term success. Your environment, on the other hand, never takes a day off. It influences you constantly, often without your awareness. The people around you, the conversations you hear, the content you consume, and the routines you repeat every day are shaping your decisions whether you notice it or not. You don't rise to the level of your intentions, you fall to the level of your environment. If your surroundings reward distraction, comfort, and excuses, no amount of motivation will save you in the long run. Think about how easily your behavior changes when your environment changes. When you walk into a gym, you naturally think about working out. When you sit in a library, your voice lowers and your focus sharpens. When you're around ambitious people, your standards rise. When you're around negative people, your energy drops. This isn't weakness, it's human nature. Your environment gives you cues and your brain responds automatically. Fighting those cues every day with willpower is exhausting and unnecessary. Most people don't fail because they lack discipline. They fail because they design their lives to make discipline difficult. They keep distractions within arm's reach and expect self-control to do the heavy lifting. They stay in environments that normalize mediocrity and then wonder why excellence feels so hard. If you put a bowl of junk food on the table, eventually you'll eat it. If you surround yourself with people who complain, eventually you'll complain. The setup determines the outcome. Changing your environment is not dramatic, but it is decisive. It means removing what weakens you and adding what strengthens you. It means curating what you listen to, who you give access to your time, and where you place your attention. It means structuring your day so the right actions are easier than the wrong ones. When your environment supports your goals, progress stops feeling like a fight. Discipline becomes natural because resistance is reduced. There's also an emotional side to environment that people overlook. The words spoken around you shape your beliefs. Repeated doubt lowers expectation. Repeated belief raises performance. If you constantly hear what's unrealistic, impossible, or not for people like us, you'll eventually internalize it. That's why protecting your mental environment is just as important as managing your physical one. What you repeatedly hear becomes what you even truly believe. High performers don't rely on willpower. They rely on design. They build systems that make success the default option. They create routines that work even on bad days. They choose environments that pull them forward instead of dragging them back. They understand that consistency is easier when the world around you is aligned with the person you're trying to become. If you truly want change, stop asking yourself to be stronger and start making your environment smarter. Rearrange your life so progress is the path of least resistance. Because when your environment is right, willpower becomes optional and success becomes inevitable. Most people are busy every single day, yet their lives look the same year after year. Their calendars are full, their phones never stop buzzing, and their energy is constantly drained, but nothing meaningful is changing. That's because busyness has become a disguise for a lack of direction. Being busy feels productive, but it often has very little to do with progress. Activity creates the illusion of movement, while outcomes require intention. If what you're doing doesn't produce a measurable result, it's not productivity, it's noise. Busyness is comfortable because it keeps you occupied. It gives you a sense of importance and makes you feel needed. Productivity, on the other hand, requires focus, prioritization, and the courage to ignore things that don't matter. That's uncomfortable for most people. It forces you to admit that not everything deserves your attention, and that some tasks, no matter how urgent they seem, are simply distractions. Busy people respond to everything. Productive people decide what deserves a response. One of the biggest traps of busyness is that it avoids responsibility for results. You can always say, I've been working hard, even when nothing is improving. But effort without direction is wasted energy. Productivity asks a harder question. Is what I'm doing actually moving me closer to the outcome I want? If the answer is no, then all the effort in the world won't save you. Results don't care how tired you are. They only respond to leverage and focus. Another reason people stay busy instead of productive is because busyness protects them from fear. Deep, meaningful work exposes you to the possibility of failure. Shallow, repetitive tasks feel safer. You can stay busy for years without ever risking rejection, criticism, or uncertainty. Productivity requires you to work on things that matter, and things that matter come with risk. So people unconsciously choose low-impact tasks because they feel controllable, even though they lead nowhere. Productivity is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters most. It's about identifying the small number of actions that create the majority of results and eliminating everything else. That requires clarity, discipline, and sometimes saying no to good opportunities so you can say yes to great ones. Busy people measure their days by why? How much they did? Productive people measure their days by what actually moved. There's also a cost to constant busyness that people ignore. It fragments your attention. Every interruption resets your focus, and fragmented focus leads to mediocre outcomes. High-level results require sustained concentration. You cannot produce meaningful work in a state of constant reaction. When you're always responding, you're letting other people's priorities control your future. Productivity begins when you reclaim ownership of your time. The most successful people structure their days around outcomes, not tasks. They ask, what is the one thing that, if done well today, makes everything else easier or unnecessary? Then they protect time for that work as if it were non-negotiable. They understand that energy is limited and must be invested where it produces the highest return. Everything else is either delegated, delayed, or eliminated. If you want your life to change, stop glorifying busyness and start demanding results. Audit your actions. Cut what doesn't matter. Focus on what does. Because at the end of the day, being busy might make you tired, but only productivity will make you free. Most people believe their limits are external. They think their progress is restricted by money, opportunities, education, or connections. But long before any of those factors come into play, there is an internal limit already in place. That limit is self-image. Your self-image is the way you see yourself, the role you believe you deserve to play, and the level of success you secretly think is appropriate for someone like you. Whether you realize it or not, this internal picture acts like an invisible ceiling. You may grow, work hard, and improve for a while, but eventually you will stop at the level that feels familiar and acceptable to your identity. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your self-image. That's why people often sabotage opportunities right when things start going well. It's not because they lack skill or intelligence. It's because success at that level feels unfamiliar and unsafe. The mind is designed to protect what feels normal, not what is best. If deep down you see yourself as average, you will unconsciously reject extraordinary outcomes. You will procrastinate, overthink, hesitate, or create problems where none exist, all to return to what feels comfortable. Self-image is shaped by repetition, what you hear repeatedly, experience repeatedly, and tell yourself repeatedly becomes your internal standard. Past failures, criticism, and comparisons leave marks. Over time, those marks turn into beliefs, and beliefs quietly drive behavior. If you believe success is for other people, you won't fully commit when opportunity appears. If you believe you're not good with money, you'll find ways to lose it. If you believe you always struggle, you'll recreate struggle even when the path becomes clear. What makes self-image so powerful is that it works automatically. You don't wake up and decide to limit yourself. It happens subconsciously. You choose actions that align with who you believe you are. You feel discomfort when your results exceed your identity and relief when things return to normal. That's why temporary motivation doesn't create permanent change. You can push yourself for a short time, but eventually your identity pulls you back like gravity. Changing your self-image requires intention, not hope. You have to consciously redefine who you are becoming. That means changing the language you use about yourself, the standards you accept, and the behaviors you tolerate. You don't wait to feel confident before acting. You act in alignment with the person you're deciding to become. Every disciplined action is a vote for a new identity. Every kept promise strengthens self-trust. Over time, behavior reshapes belief, and belief reshapes results. Your environment also reinforces your self-image. If you surround yourself with people who see you as who you used to be, growth becomes harder. They may not mean harm, but familiarity keeps you boxed in. Elevation often requires separation, not emotionally, but mentally. You must be willing to outgrow old labels even when others are comfortable with them. Respectfully, firmly, and consistently, you show through action that you are no longer operating at that level. The moment your self-image changes, your decision-making changes. You stop asking what's easy and start asking what's aligned. You stop negotiating with your potential and start honoring it. Opportunities you once ignored suddenly feel possible. Challenges that once intimidated you become invitations to expand, not because the world changed, but because you did. If you want higher results, don't just set higher goals. Build a higher self-image, because no matter how much opportunity is in front of you, you will never sustain a level of success that your identity refuses to accept. The ceiling is invisible, but it is real, and the only way past it is to become someone who no longer believes it belongs there. We live in a time where information is endless and access is instant. You can learn almost anything, anytime, from anywhere. But despite all this access, most people are not moving forward. They are overwhelmed, not empowered. The reason is simple. They are consuming far more than they are creating. Consumption feels productive because it gives you the sense that you're preparing, learning, and staying informed. But preparation without execution quickly turns into a trap. Knowledge that isn't applied doesn't transform your life. It just fills your mind. Consumption is passive. Creation is active. When you consume, you take in other people's thoughts, ideas, and frameworks. When you create, you organize your own thinking, test your understanding, and add value to the world. Growth accelerates when you shift from watching to building. Most people wait until they feel ready to create, but readiness doesn't come from consuming more, it comes from doing. The act of creating sharpens clarity, builds confidence, and reveals gaps that consumption alone can never expose. Another danger of overconsumption is comparison. When you constantly watch what others are doing, you begin to measure your progress against highlights instead of reality. That leads to discouragement, hesitation, and self-doubt. You start questioning your voice, your ideas, and your timing. Creation breaks that cycle. The moment you build something, anything, you move from observer to participant. You stop judging from the sidelines and start learning through experience. Experience always beats theory. People often say they don't have anything valuable to share yet. But value is not about being perfect, it's about being useful. You don't need to be the best. You just need to be one step ahead of someone else. When you create, you document your journey, not just your destination. That documentation becomes a resource, a brand, and eventually leverage. The world rewards those who contribute, not those who consume quietly and wait. Consumption also drains time and attention. Hours disappear scrolling, watching, and absorbing content that rarely changes behavior. Creation, on the other hand, forces focus. It demands structure, effort, and intentionality. Even when it's uncomfortable, it's productive. You may not get immediate results, but you gain skill, momentum, and self-respect. Creation compounds. Every piece builds on the last. Consumption resets you back to zero. The people who win in the long term understand this shift. They consume with purpose and create by default. They don't aim to know everything, they aim to apply something. They live. It intake and prioritize output. They treat their ideas as assets, not fantasies. Over time, creation builds influence, income, and opportunities that consumption alone never will. If you want your life to change, you must flip the ratio. Learn enough to move, then move enough to learn. Stop waiting to feel ready and start creating where you are with what you have. Because the future doesn't belong to the most informed. It belongs to the most applied. Most people believe motivation is the engine of progress. They think once they feel inspired, confident, or excited enough, they'll finally take action. So they wait. They wait for the right mood, the right energy, the right moment. But motivation is emotional, and emotions are inconsistent. They rise and fall based on sleep, stress, environment, and circumstances. If your progress depends on how you feel, your results will always be unpredictable. That's why motivation creates bursts of action but rarely produces lasting change. Principles are different. Principles are stable. They don't care how you feel. They don't negotiate with excuses. A principle is a decision you've already made about how you operate. When you live by principles, action becomes automatic. You don't ask yourself if you're in the mood. You act because it's who you are and what you do. High-level performers don't wake up motivated every day. They wake up committed to a standard they refuse to break. Waiting for motivation is appealing because it feels kind to yourself. It feels like you're honoring your emotions, but in reality, it keeps you trapped. It gives fear permission to stay in control. Fear thrives in delay. The longer you wait, the heavier the task feels. Momentum dies, confidence fades, and self-trust erodes. Every time you say, I'll do it when I feel like it, you teach yourself that your word is conditional. Over time, that weakens your belief in yourself. Principles eliminate decision fatigue. When you already know what you do and what you don't do, life becomes simpler. You don't debate whether to show up, follow through, or do the hard thing. The decision was made in advance. This frees mental energy for execution instead of internal negotiation. Motivation asks, do I feel like it today? Principles ask, what does my standard require? One leads to inconsistency. The other leads to growth. Another reason people cling to motivation is because principles expose them. Principles force alignment between identity and behavior. You can't hide behind temporary feelings. You either live by your standard or you don't. That level of honesty is uncomfortable, but it's also empowering. When your actions align with your principles, confidence grows naturally. Not because things are easy, but because you can trust yourself to act regardless of emotion. Operating on principles doesn't mean ignoring how you feel. It means not letting feelings lead. Emotions are signals, not commanders. You acknowledge them, then act anyway. Over time, something interesting happens. Motivation starts to follow action instead of preceding it. Discipline creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence then fuels motivation. But it all starts with action rooted in principle. The most successful people don't rely on inspiration. They rely on identity-based rules. They decide what kind of person they are and let that decision guide their behavior. They show up when it's inconvenient. They work when it's boring. They continue when results are slow. Not because they're special, but because they're principle-driven. If you want consistency, stop waiting to feel motivated and start living by standards. Decide what you stand for, decide how you operate, and then act accordingly. Motivation will come and go. Principles will carry you when motivation disappears. And in the long run, principles, not feelings, are what build real, lasting success. Let me leave you with this. Nothing you heard today is complicated, but it is demanding. Because real change doesn't require more information. It requires more honesty with yourself. You already know what needs to be fixed. You already know what you've been avoiding. The difference between staying where you are and stepping into the next level is not talent, luck, or timing. It's the decisions your will aim to make when no one is watching. The year ahead will move forward whether you do or not. 2026 will not slow down, wait for confidence, or adjust to comfort. It will reward clarity through commitment, progress through environment, results through focus, growth through identity, freedom through creation, and consistency through principles. Those who take responsibility will rise. Those who wait will stay exactly where they are. This is your moment to decide who you are becoming, not when conditions are perfect, not when motivation is high, but now, because now is the only time you can control. Fix what's been holding you back, raise your standards, and move forward with intention. If you do, 2026 won't just be another year on the calendar. It will be the year your life finally catches up to your potential.